So this video is all about division of whole numbers, and we're going to see some division that works out nicely and some division that maybe there's a remainder for, which we'll get to in a little bit. So let's start off with just a definition. So division is the act of splitting a group of items into equal parts, right? So here's my quick example of this. If I ask you to do 12 divided by 3, what I actually mean when I say 12 divided by 3 is I have 12 items, and there are 3 people that I'm going to give those items to. I've decided that I'm going to split them. I need to take these 12 items and give everybody, all 3 of these people, the same amount. And so in this case, the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to just split it up and say, in this case, here, oh, can't have it covering up your numbers. Let me get rid of this. Fill color. Okay, I can't. So I'm just going to use my pen. So I'm going to say, in this case, this group here, okay, and this group here, okay, and this last one here. And if you notice, I've made 3 groups out of the 12, and everybody's getting the same amount of stars, right? Everybody's getting 4. And so I would say in my answer is how many, when I'm saying 12 divided by 3, I'm saying 12 items. There are 3 people that need to get these items. How many do each person get? Well, I was able to divide the 12 equally into parts, and so I would say each of these people gets 4 stars, okay? So here's the issue that we're going to run into eventually. Okay, so let's see if I can find my fancy tool for this. Okay, so let's say I had an extra star. I had a 13th star. So now my problem becomes 13 divided by 3. So now how do I take these 13 items and make sure that everybody gets the same amount? Right? I can't just say, well, I have this extra star, I'm going to hold on to it. I can't say, I'm just going to give it to the first person and he's going to have 5. I need to make sure that everybody gets the same amount of stars. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 3rd star and I'm actually going to split it into parts. Okay? And this is where fractions are going to start in. Everybody's going to get 4 whole stars, and then everybody's going to get 1 part of this last extra star. Okay? So we're going to actually have to start thinking about how many whole groups can I give before I get to a point where it's going to start to be unfair, and that's the challenging part of division. Okay? So here's the last little note. Division is the opposite of multiplication, and if you notice in a nice simple problem here, the answer that I got, that there were 4 stars per person, times this number right here that I divided by the number of people, when I multiply these back together, I get the group. Okay? So 3 times 4, the answer and what I divided by will multiply together and give me back the total that I started with. Okay? So we're going to look at a few problems and kind of build our way up to the point where we get to some of these extra problems that have extra parts. But let's start off with something that looks like 108 divided by 12. Okay? So 108 divided by 12, let's start off with this. I'm asking you to find the quotient, and so quotient is the answer to a division problem. So we now have 4 key vocabulary words that we're going to look for. Sum is the answer to an addition problem. Difference is the answer to subtraction. Product for multiplication, and now quotient for division. So these are just key words that you might see show up a little later where you're not told which operation to use, but that keyword is going to tell you what to do. Okay? So here's the first important part, and this is going back to what I just said here about division is the opposite of multiplication. If you know your multiplication facts well, which when we did multiplication you had the nice big multiplication table up to 12 times 12, you can look on that one, and if I were to look down the 12 times tables, okay, if I look down the 12 times tables, I will find in this case the number 108 on there. Okay? In this case it would be in the 12 times 9 column. Okay? So if you know your math facts, your multiplication facts, they're memorized, they're ready to go, you can look at that and say, okay, I know that 12 times 9 is 108, so that's going to work. So here's a couple of other simple examples. If I did something like 35 divided by 7, we know that the answer to this is 5 because we know that 5 times 7 gives me 35. Okay? If I had something like 121 divided by 11, I know that my answer is 11 because I know my multiplication facts, and I know 11 times 11 gives me 121. Okay? So this is really, really, really important because once we get to more complicated ones, you're going to need to know those facts so you can kind of do things in parts, or at least get as close as you can. Okay? So one possibility is you know your math facts, you know that 12 times something gives me 108, or 7 times something gives me 35. You can use those facts and instantly know your answer. Okay? But what happens if we get something like this? And now we're sitting here saying, I don't know how, or I can't think of a number 12 times something that gives me 110. Okay, what you're going to have to do, and again, you can use this chart as a reference until you have them memorized, is think, how close can I get before I go over and I have done too much? So in this case, I'm thinking 12 times, let's just make some guesses, 12 times 7, okay, well that's 84, right? So if I did 12 times 7, okay, that's 84. Okay, 12 times 8, okay, well that's 96. I'm still not to 110, so I'm still good. 12 times 9, well we just said a second ago that was 108, so we're still good there. 12 times 10 is 120. This is too much, right? 120 is over 110. 108 still below. So I'm going to say in this case, too bad, this one doesn't work. So I'm going to say at this case, I can at least give everybody 9 items, right? So I can say there's 12 groups that I'm trying to split up this 110 in. Everybody gets at least 9. So 9 whole items out of the 110, and that gets me to 108, right? So I'm sitting here saying, okay, well I have these 2 extra ones now, right? I have 110 things total. I've given out 108 of them, and I have these 2 extra ones. For right now, what we're going to do is we're going to say, just put a little R here to say remaining out of the 110, there are 2. Okay? So what this means is that I was able to give each of the 12 groups, right, the 12 groups that I was giving items to, I started with my 110 and I said, you get one, and you get one, and you get one. And I went down the line and I kept doing that. And at the end, everybody had 9 items. And then I looked in my hand and there were still 2 left over. Okay? And so I'm saying I can't give everybody another one, so I'm finished. Okay? So we're going to talk in a little bit about what to do with this going forward. But for right now, we're just going to say I can give everybody 9 whole items, and there are going to be 2 left over that I can't hand out to anybody yet. Okay? So let's talk about another one. 248 divided by 8. So now we're kind of to the point where, like, I don't know my 8 times tables all the way up to 248, so I can't quickly just make a list or look at my reference and try to figure that out. So this is the point where now we're going to start breaking it up into smaller problems, right, and trying to deal with those. So you're probably familiar with this little division house, okay? And so we're going to convert it from this form, this horizontal form, into the division house to help us to just organize ourselves, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the big number, or I'll say this correctly, the first number, okay, what we're dividing 248 items, we're going to place that underneath. The number of times that we're dividing this goes on the outside right here, okay? And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go, can I do 8 divided by this first number, okay? And in this case, we're saying, not really, I can't, because I can't take just 2 things. I can't take 2 things and divide them 8 ways. That doesn't work. So I'm going to skip that one, and then I'm going to look at it and say, well, what if I put together the first 2? Can I look at that and say, can I divide that nicely? And in this case, I can. I can take 24 items and divide them among 8 people. Knowing my multiplication facts, I know that this comes out to be 3, right? 3 times 8 is 24. I can divide that nicely. It works perfectly. Okay? So I'm going to say I divided this 24 up 3 times, okay, to give 8 times to give everybody 3 items. So now here's the way that we kind of go through here and make sure we're keeping things in line. So I put the 3 right above the 4 because that's where this number ended. And now I'm going to multiply. I'm going to say 3 times 8 is 24, and I'm going to place that number right below the number that I have here. Okay, so I'm going to say take 3 times 8 is 24. Okay, and I'm going to subtract. Okay, I'm going to subtract these away because I've kind of used up this 24. They're no longer a part of my number. Okay, and so I'm going to subtract, and this becomes 0. Right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to the next digit, the 8, and I'm going to bring that down. Okay, so I don't need to write 0, 8. 0, 8 is just 8. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to use this number, and I'm going to say 8 divided by 8, and I'm going to place that above this row. So I'm going to go right up, and I'm going to say 1. Okay, so 1 times 8 gives me 8, and I'm going to subtract again because I've used them up, and this comes out to be 0. Okay, so I'm done. I went to the very, very last digit on the inside here, brought it all the way down. I don't have anything else left to bring down. I'm going to say I'm finished. My answer is 31. 248 divided by 8, the answer, the quotient, is 31. Okay, so sometimes you're going to have these numbers where you don't know your math facts, and you're going to have to go through and use this method of, we call this long division, to sit here and kind of break it up into smaller parts. I do know what 8 divided into 24 is. I do know what 8 divided into 8 is. Right? So I'm breaking that big number up into smaller parts. Okay. This next problem, we're going to do the same thing. This is very similar, but what's going to happen in this case is things don't work out nearly as nicely for us when I try this. So I'm going to start off with taking the 491, first number, placing it on the inside. And I'm going to take the 7, which is how many people are getting my 491 things, okay, and I'm going to do my division. So 7 doesn't go into 4, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But 7 does go into 49 when I look at these two together. So 7 into 49 is 7. Okay, 7, and then when I do my multiplication, when I go this way, okay, 7 times 7 is 49. Okay. So when I subtract these, I get 0, so I'm not going to bring down the 0. I'm just going to kind of say, well, that's all I got left. Right? 0 and a 1 is really just 1. Okay. So when I'm going to do the next one, I'm going to say, how many times does 7 go into 1? Well, it doesn't go in at all. I can't. If I have 7 people standing there waiting for their next item, I've already given everybody 7 of them, right? I've already given out some. Okay? And I have only 1 left in my hand, and I'm sitting there saying, all right, well, I don't have enough to give everybody the same amount, so I have this 1 left over. I'm going to have to note up here, I'm going to say, okay, on this second round through, I don't have any items that I can give to everybody, right? So 7 goes into 1 0 whole times. Okay? So if you notice, this is 70 now, okay? And I'm going to look and say, well, this one's left over, so I'm going to say there's a remainder of 1. Okay? So you got to be careful. Whenever you get to the end and you're sitting there saying, well, I can't take this 7 into 1, right? I can't divide one item up by 7 different people. I need to note that right above the 1 and say I was able to divide that thing 0 times, right? Because the answer is not 7 in this case, it's 70, right? So I got to put that 0 up there to make sure that we're accounting for that fact that we did not divide it all. And then I'm going to say, well, I had 1 left over that I could not divide. I'm going to put a little note up there to say that there was a remainder of 1. Okay, so you'll see this 0 show up especially at the end if we can't do our division. Okay, so let's do our next one. So it says 1286. 1286 goes on the inside, 81 goes on the outside. So let's find out what happens here. So if I were to look at this one and say, okay, 81 can't go into 1, it can't go into 12 because I'm still too small, but I can go into 128. Now I'm large enough. 128 is big enough that I can at least give everybody 1 of something. Okay, so let's see what happens when we do this. So if I do 81, and I need to figure out how many times I can do this. So if I were to do it once, right, if I were to put like a 1 up here, and notice I'm going all the way to the end. 8 was at the end of this digit, the biggest one that I could use, so I'm placing the answer up there. If I were to do that, okay, I could definitely do it. So now I'm thinking to myself, could I give everybody a second round? Do I have enough to do it a second time? So I'm going to say, well, what would happen if I gave everybody another 81 items? Well, when I add these up, I get 162. I don't have 162. I only have 128. So I'm sitting there and saying, 1 was as close as I could get without going over top and running out of items. So I can only give 1 here. 2 is too many. Okay. So now I'm going to go through and say 1 times 81 goes here. And again, note what I did. This is the 1's place and the 10's place. I placed it below the 1's and the 10's. I didn't place it below the 1 here because this is hundreds and I don't have any hundreds. Okay. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm subtracting. So I'm saying 8 minus 1 is 7. And then 12 minus 8, okay, is 4. Or you can borrow if you want. Okay, but I have 47 items left over. And then I'm going to bring down the 6. Okay, so the 6 is going to come down and get tacked on the end. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say 81 into 476. So here's what we're going to do. We need to think about how many 81s could I hand out before I get too big, before I'm over 476. So I'm going to just kind of maybe make like 4 of these, and let's see how close I get. Okay. So if I add down this column, it looks like that's 4, and when I add this, it's 8, 16, 16 plus 8 is 24, 24 plus another 8 is 32. So with 4 81s, I'm still below my 476. I'm good. So now I'm going to try and add in another 81. Right. So you kind of use your best guess to figure out like what's something that's high enough but not too high. So I guess like 4 of them. So now I'm going to add another 81, and this is a 5, and it looks like a 4, a 40, right? 405. Okay. And so now I'm going to say, okay, well, what happened if I were to add another 81? Well, this would be 486. Well, I don't have 486. I only have 476, which means I can't do this one. So it looks like I was able to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different 81s. So I'm going to place a 5 right here. And we've already done the work here to figure out how close I got. Well, this is going to be 5 times 81 is this 405. Okay? And I'm going to subtract again. So when I subtract on this column, I get a 1. When I subtract on this column, I get a 7. So now if you notice, I'm at the end. I have nothing else to bring down. 81's too small. Right? I can't give, if I only have 71 items left, I can't give them to 81 people. So I'm done. Like these 71 are leftover. So I was able to give everybody 15 items, and I had 71 left over. Okay? And so I'm going to say that is my answer. Okay? So let's do one more problem, make the number a little bit larger, right? And then we'll be finished. So my last problem says 84,321. There's my big number. Okay? And my small number is 225. Okay? So I'm going to go through and say 225 can't go into 8. Too small, can't go into 84, still too small, can go into 843 because it's bigger than 225. So I need to think about how many 225s can I use. So there's 2 of them. Let's see where I get here. So this is 0, carry a 1, 5, nothing to carry, 4. So I'm still close. I'm still like way below 843. So let's add in another one. Another 225. I'm trying to figure out how many of these can I use before I get too big. 675, still below that 843. All right, so I'd highly recommend, see what I do with the underlying here. This is underlining. This is to remind myself what number I'm looking for. Okay, so I'm going to add another 225. Let's see where I get. This is 0, carry a 1. This is 10, carry a 1. And this is another 10. So I'm at 1,000 now, right? So I'm saying this doesn't work, can't use that one. It looks like I used 3 different 225s. So I'm going to place that right above the end of the number. And I'm going to multiply. And we've already done the answer. This is 3 225s. It's 675. So if I multiply along here, I'm going to get a 675. Okay? Or if you want to actually do your multiplication, you're more than welcome to do 3 times, do it kind of off to the side. Okay? So let me get rid of this line. Okay? So I'm going to say my answer, 3 times 225 is 675, and I need to subtract. Okay, so when I subtract, I'm going to say 3 minus 5 doesn't work, so let me borrow. 13 minus 5 is 8. Okay, that's good. 3 minus 7 doesn't work, so I need to borrow from here, so I can make this 13. 13 minus 7 is 6, and then I can come to the end here, 7 minus 6 is 1. Okay, so now I'm going to say, all right, 225, 168. I need to bring down my next digit, which is the 2, right? I went to 843. I'm going to bring down this 2. Okay? And it looks like 225 into 1,682. This one's a little bit more challenging. Right? So I'm going to go back here, and I already did 4 times, right? So I'm going to go to the end here and fix this. Right? We've already done this last 225, got us up to 1,000. Okay? And so now I just have to figure out how many more 225s do I need to add. Okay, but so I want to kind of help you out with this. Just repeatedly adding one at a time is going to be a little bit challenging. You could say, if you notice, here's 1, 2, and 3. That got me up to 675. So instead of adding them one at a time, you can kind of look above and say, well, how can I get myself pretty close? Let me add 675 to this, right? And just remember, like kind of off to the side here, that represents 3 more 225s. This gets me to 1,675. And if you notice, I'm trying to get to 1,682. So I'm pretty close. Okay? So I'm going to say that's where I want to get. So it looked like I used 1, 2, 3, and then 3 more down here. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So I use these 4 225s, and then this one's got 3 more in it. So that looks like 7. So I use 7 total. Okay, and that got me to 675. Okay, so let's do my subtraction now. Okay, and again, if that kind of goes a little over your head, how I got 675, you can add them one at a time. Just take you a little longer, but until you're comfortable with that. Okay, so when I subtract these, I'll let you do the subtraction. It looks like I end up with a 7. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down my last digit. That's this 1. Right, I had a 2 down, and if it helps you to maybe use some colors, this move down here. This is going to move down here. And I'm going to end up with my last digit, okay, which is a 1. Okay, so I'm going to say 1. So 71, here's the nice thing, 225, I only have 71 things left. I can't give everybody 1. That's my remainder. It's too small of a number to get that 225. So I'm going to say remainder 71. So my final answer to this one is 37 with a remainder of 71. And just as a little note, your remainder better be smaller than your big number here, or you could have given everybody one more. So be careful with that. Okay. So this is probably the most challenging of them because I had to get to really large numbers. So your ability to, instead of adding repeatedly, doing 225 plus 225 plus 225 and keep doing that, knowing how to use multiplication, which is what I really did down here. This is 225 times 3, and I just kind of noted off here that I used 3 of them. Helps save me a lot of time. So just be careful. Use it when you understand it, but it's going to help you and save you a lot of time as you go through these problems.